where Emily and I have kind of been like, whoa, like we've kind of lost track of some of our rhythms. I think for me, like, and this is something that I've been working on in this season, like I've been too glued to my phone. That came back in during this whole situation. And that was a rhythm that I was trying to like be, I didn't want to be digitally distracted, but I've gotten back into digital distraction. So the other thing is that when hard seasons come, like, yes, those rhythms help you. But it can be really hard, and it can remind you that you do fail and that you will fall short. Just like you will in the beginning, when you first start those things. But ultimately, like, there will be a point, at least in my experience, where you are reminded yet again that there's nothing in this world that can compare to the things that we do to grow in our relationship with Jesus. So even after going through so far in my adult life, the hardest thing that I've had to deal with, I now am able to still say, like, yep, and I got distracted for a season, and I kind of lost some rhythms for a season. Yeah. But I am eager to get back in. Why? Because I know it's that much more beneficial. So
good.
That is so good. I feel like it's like in all of that, there is more of an emphasis on the grace of God and the power of his presence, because I can relate a lot to your journey.
Right, yeah.
When my husband's mom passed, we like had established such good rhythms. But after that happened, like for a week, I binged Gilmore Girls. Like that was my show. I wasn't listening to music. It was the same thing. Like I love music. And in that season, I couldn't listen to anything because I didn't want music to be attached to that. So I can relate to that. And I was like, I just need something that takes me out of this world and that isn't heavy, that's lighthearted, funny, that kind of thing. Gilmore Girls, great show. Yes, New Girl's great. And then it was in that season, I was like, forget my rhythms. Like, I feel like God has just failed my family. So I'm, going to ignore that and numb myself. And then coming out of that, you can feel a sense of guilt of like, man, like, why couldn't I, stay with that? And now I'm working to gain this back. But it's like in the crushing moments, rhythms can help us. But ultimately, like when you are in the pit, it's not necessarily those rhythms that are necessarily going to pull you out as much as it is God's grace and power and favor and love and kindness. So I feel like people just need to know that rhythms are so important, but to not feel defeated if you're wrestling or struggling with those, because ultimately it's his grace that covers all of that. So
and it's because when we're talking about regular rhythms, we're not talking about our like salvation,
right,
and what Jesus has done for us. What we are talking about is we're being shaped and formed into something. And God's intent is that we're shaped and formed into the likeness of Jesus so that this world is able to see God and his character and his fullness. And so, but there's those seasons where it's like, man, thankful for God's grace, and that hopefully, because I think what happens is that maybe you experience a dark pit valley season, but then that becomes the normal rhythm. That thing that you had gone to now is the normal and will produce in you something that you never intended. And it's like, well, you didn't get to choose that your father almost died.
Right.
And not only almost died, but went through a long season of ups and downs. Like you said, hope and then despair and then hope and then despair. So you didn't get to choose that, right? But there comes a certain point where you say, well, I don't want to be formed into whatever will be formed if I continue in these practices or rhythms or distractions. So I want to introduce back into it. And the beautiful thing is God's grace allows us to do that.